Can we stay near your porch? No.
Come inside. Come inside.
Snow claws at an Aspen mansion. Inside, a striking CEO in his mid-40s watches a quiet fire. Like any lonely neighbor, he knows silence. A soft knock. On the step, an 8-year-old, cheeks raw from cold, clutching a worn toy car with a missing wheel. "Can I sleep in your garage?" he whispers. "Not the garage. Inside," the CEO says. Mercy opens the door, but guilt waits by the fire. Tonight, will one boy rewrite his life? Snow blew sideways across Red Mountain as Cole Harrington stood at the window of his Aspen estate, jacket still on though the house ran warm. He was 46, the kind of striking that turned heads at airports. Deep blue eyes, dark brown hair threaded with clean gray, a jaw that looked carved, shoulders that filled a doorway. The navy suit and red tie were habit, the armor of a man who built and bought the skyline. In Denver, Vail, Telluride, his company owned peaks and penthouses, spas that smelled like cedar and success. The Rockies had learned his name. Tonight, the mountain said nothing back. He moved through the great room the way a careful swimmer crosses cold water. The stone fireplace carried a slow fire. Between its soft crackles he could hear the winter, the real one, battering glass and pine. Staff had gone down the mountain before the whiteout. The estate hummed once and settled, like a sleeping animal conserving heat. Cole set a report on the table, then closed it without reading the last page. Operations numbers, occupancy forecasts, partner notes about a new slopeside restaurant. All neat, all solvent. None of it made the place feel less hollow. He checked his phone out of reflex. No messages that mattered. He silenced a thread from an investor who liked to text late and loud. In the study, he turned on the brass lamp and opened the case along the wall. A neat line of die-cast cars sat on glass, each waxed and still. Small machines that had once roared across a boyhood rug. His father had given them to him, one birthday at a time. The old man never said much, but he always slid the car across the table and tapped a finger on the hood. Take care of what carries you. The collection had survived 3 moves, 2 market crashes, and the long quiet after the funeral. He reached in and lifted one with a thumb dent in the roof. Years ago, he had gripped it too tight during a thunderstorm. He smiled, then let the smile pass. Silence grew thick. He tried the trick that sometimes worked. He pictured a full lobby, a check-in desk alive with voices. A couple laughing at a map of ski runs. He pictured heat lamps on a patio, mulled wine rising in white breath, a bellman lining skis like gleaming fence posts. He pictured the life he was supposed to feel. The trick failed. He loosened his tie, then tightened it again. The window in the study tunneled a view through dark to the front steps. Snow swirled like torn paper. He remembered a board member's toast last week, to the king of winter. Everyone laughed. Cole had, too. In rooms like that, laughter was a currency. Alone, it was an echo. He crossed back into the kitchen. The marble was cold beneath his palm. He set water to boil, watched the burner bloom. The sound felt honest. He made tea he would not finish. He stood with the steam and thought about the word home. On paper, he owned thousands. He could open a tablet and see heating systems and door sensors, all the measurements of comfort. He could not measure the ache that threaded its way through rooms like this one. He carried the tea to the foyer and paused under the chandelier. He had meant to take down the wreath the staff hung too early, but the scent of pine earned its stay. He imagined, without meaning to, a different foyer, smaller, warmer, a kitchen light left on for someone running late. He imagined a voice answering back when he said good night. He set the cup on the table and let the warmth fade against the air. The wind threw a hard fist at the western windows. It sounded like a knock from a giant. He almost laughed at the thought, and then he did not. He listened to the house settle again. He tried to name what he missed, but the word would not come. It was not the thrill of a deal. It was not applause. It was a simpler thing, and it would not speak. He went back to the study and replaced the car in its line. Under the glass, all the paint gleamed. Not one was chipped. Not one wheel wobbled. He tapped the case shut and turned off the lamp. In the dark, the window threw his reflection back at him, suit and shoulders, a red tie like a cardinal against snow. He told himself to sleep. He told himself he had early calls. He told himself that winter was only weather. He stood another minute anyway, listening to a quiet that felt too much like a memory. He crossed the great room one more time, fire to foyer, and laid a hand on the door as if checking a heartbeat. Outside, the storm answered for the mountain. Inside, the house held its breath. Cole did the same, without knowing why, the way a man does when the season is about to turn and he can almost hear it. The storm pressed harder against the glass walls of the Aspen estate, each gust rattling the tall windows like a warning. Inside, the CEO stood motionless in his study, the fire casting restless shadows on polished oak shelves lined with property ledgers and framed contracts. He should have been reviewing market reports. Instead, his gaze kept drifting toward the front hall, where faint, uncertain knocks had broken the silence moments before. For a man who had built empires out of stone and glass, knocks at his door were rarely surprises. Yet tonight, something about the sound carried desperation, hesitant, fragile, almost lost in the roar of the blizzard. He loosened his red tie, smoothed the front of his tailored navy suit, and walked slowly toward the entryway. The heavy oak door resisted the wind as he pulled it open. A wave of frigid air rushed in, chilling even the warmth of the mansion's hearths. And there, small and trembling against the storm, stood a boy. No more than 8 years old, he looked impossibly small beneath the oversized coat hanging from his thin frame. His cheeks were raw with frostbite, lips pale, eyes wide with the kind of fear no child should carry. Snow clung to his hair, melting into rivulets that streaked down his face. In his right hand, he clutched a ragged backpack whose seams had long given up, threads dangling loose like weary arms. On his feet were boots clearly meant for someone older, the soles worn thin and the laces knotted around his ankles to keep them from slipping off. The boy swayed slightly, as though standing upright took all the strength he had left. His voice, when it came, was barely louder than the wind. "Please, sir, can I sleep in your garage, just until morning?" The words struck harder than the cold. The CEO blinked, caught between disbelief and something far deeper. A child at his door, begging not for food, not for money, but for permission to curl up in a frozen garage. He could have closed the door. He could have called staff, security, anyone else. That was the pattern of his life. Delegate, distance, decide from above. But something in the boy's tone, the quiet plea threaded with exhaustion, cut through the fortress he'd built around himself. His deep blue eyes softened. He crouched, bringing his tall, commanding frame down to the boy's shivering level. The firelight behind him spilled across his sharp features. The square jaw, the streaks of elegant gray through dark hair, transforming them from untouchable to unexpectedly human. "No," he said, the word firm but warm. Then, more gently, he added, "You don't belong in a garage. You belong inside." The boy's eyes widened, confusion flickering with disbelief. His small hands tightened around the battered backpack. From its side pocket, half exposed, the CEO noticed a toy. An old die-cast car, its paint chipped, one wheel missing. The sight jolted something within him. For a moment, he wasn't standing in his grand hallway of marble floors and crystal chandeliers. He was back in a memory of his own boyhood, holding a similar car his father had once handed him in simpler times, before the boardrooms, before the betrayals, before the silence of a wealth swallowed everything else. "Come in," he urged, pushing the door open wider. The boy hesitated, his breath forming fragile clouds in the freezing air. Trust did not come easily. Finally, he took a shaky step across the threshold. The warmth of the foyer enveloped him instantly, the scent of oak and leather replacing the bite of snow. The CEO closed the door against the storm and crouched once more to meet the boy's eyes. "What's your name?" he asked softly. The boy hugged the toy car closer, his voice trembling but clear enough. "Ethan." The CEO repeated it quietly, as though sealing a promise. "Ethan." In that instant, something shifted in the hollow mansion. The silence was no longer empty. It was waiting, listening. The warmth of the foyer wrapped around Ethan, but his small body still shook as snow melted into puddles on the polished marble floor. Cole Harrington draped his suit jacket over the boy's shoulders, the oversized fabric nearly swallowing him whole. The child's eyes darted nervously to the chandelier above, then to the grand staircase, as though the mansion itself might reject him. He clutched the battered toy car tighter, pressing it against his chest. The missing wheel wobbled as his fingers trembled. Cole lowered his voice, softening the edge that usually commanded boardrooms. "Ethan, you're safe here." The boy's lips parted. His breath came quick, uneven. Then, almost too quietly to hear, he whispered, "I don't want to be a bother. Can I just sleep in the garage? I won't touch anything. I promise." The words hit Cole harder than he expected. A child so used to rejection that a freezing garage felt like kindness. He drew a slow breath, steadying himself against an ache he hadn't felt in years. "No," he said firmly, his deep blue eyes holding the boy's. "Not the garage. You belong inside. You belong where it's warm." Ethan blinked, startled by the certainty in the man's tone. For a heartbeat, mistrust flickered. Then his gaze dropped again to the toy car. Cole noticed the way his thumb traced the chipped paint, the missing wheel. "Where'd you get that?" Cole asked gently. Ethan hesitated. "It was my mom's. From when she was little. She gave it to me so I wouldn't feel alone when she's gone at night." His voice cracked, almost swallowed by the crackle of the distant fireplace. Cole felt something stir, an old memory of his father sliding a car across the table, telling him to take care of what carries you. He had kept his collection pristine, untouched, frozen behind glass. Ethan's car was the opposite. Worn, battered, alive with history. "Can I see it?" Cole extended his hand carefully, the way one might reach for a bird afraid to fly. Ethan shook his head quickly, retreating half a step. "No. If I lose this, I don't have anything left." The raw honesty twisted deep in Cole's chest. He lowered his hand, not pressing further. "Then hold on to it," he said quietly. "Hold on as tight as you need." He led the boy toward the great room, where flames danced in the stone hearth. Cole wrapped a wool blanket around Ethan's shoulders and guided him to a seat near the fire. The boy's face, flushed from cold, softened under the glow. For a while, neither spoke. The fire cracked, the storm howled against the glass, and the silence between them grew less heavy, more shared. Finally, Ethan broke it. "Most people don't let me inside," he murmured. Cole studied him. "Most people forget what it feels like to knock on a door and hope someone answers." The boy glanced at him curiously, as though hearing a secret in those words. Cole's own reflection stared back from the window, tall, commanding, yet softened by the small figure at his side. Ethan curled deeper into the blanket, eyelids heavy but still fighting sleep. "Why are you being nice to me?" Cole hesitated, realizing he didn't have an answer that fit neatly into words. He only knew that when he looked at the boy's fragile shoulders and the chipped toy car, something inside him shifted, something that had been locked away in empty halls and glass cases. "Because," he said at last, his voice low and certain, "someone should have been nice to me when I needed it. And maybe I'm late, but I can be that for you now." Ethan studied him as though testing the truth of the words. Then, slowly, his head dipped. The toy car slipped from his fingers, landing softly in his lap. Cole watched the boy drift into uneasy sleep by the fire. He leaned back, his strong jaw tightening. For the first time in years, he felt less like a king in a fortress and more like a man at a crossroads. And in that fragile moment, as the storm raged outside, He knew one thing with unsettling clarity. This boy was not just a guest. He was the beginning of something he could no longer ignore. The fire had burned lower, glowing embers painting faint orange shadows across the stone hearth. Cole sat in the leather armchair beside it, his tall frame leaning forward, elbows resting on his knees. Across from him, Ethan stirred under the wool blanket, the toy car pressed tightly in his palm. Cole's voice was steady but gentle. "You can rest here tonight, but before you do, I want to know about you." The boy rubbed his eyes with the back of his hand, cheeks still blotched from the cold. His words came haltingly, as though each one weighed more than his small body could carry. "My name's Ethan. I'm 8. He hesitated. "My mom works nights. At the diner on Main Street. She's tired a lot. Sometimes—" His voice caught. "Sometimes she doesn't come home." Cole's jaw tightened. "What do you mean she doesn't come home?" Ethan stared at the chipped wheel of the toy car. "She says she's working extra shifts, but sometimes I wait, all night, and she never comes. I try to stay awake until the sun comes up, but it gets cold. That's when I go out, try to find somewhere safe." His eyes lifted briefly, watery with shame. "That's why I asked about your garage." The CEO felt the words strike him like a blow. He had spent decades building towers of glass and stone, whole empires of warmth and luxury. Yet an 8-year-old had been wandering the streets of Aspen in the dead of winter looking for a garage to survive the night. Cole's chest tightened, but his voice stayed calm. "Do you have anyone else? Family?" Ethan shook his head. "It's just us, me and Mom." His gaze drifted toward the flames. "She says she'll always come back, but sometimes I don't believe her." Cole leaned back, his strong shoulders shifting beneath his shirt sleeves. He glanced at the shelves that lined the room. Signed contracts, polished awards, the silent trophies of a man who had conquered everything except loneliness. Now, with this boy in front of him, those victories felt like dust. "You're safe here tonight," he repeated, his voice firmer now. "No more garages, no more waiting by yourself." Ethan studied him, searching his face for cracks. Adults had lied to him before. Adults always said they'd stay until they didn't. "You really mean that?" the boy whispered. Cole met his gaze, steady and unwavering. "I mean it." For the first time, Ethan's shoulders eased. He leaned into the blanket, his body relaxing as though some of the weight had finally been lifted. Cole let the silence settle, though it was no longer the biting silence of an empty mansion. It was gentler now, filled with the sound of a child's quiet breathing and the soft crackle of firewood. Yet, even as he sat there, Cole felt something heavy shift inside him. He saw not only the boy's exhaustion, but also the reflection of his own younger self, waiting for a father who rarely came, holding on to gifts instead of presents, mistaking objects for love. He glanced at the toy car again, its missing wheel wobbling loosely. That broken piece felt symbolic, a reminder of something unfinished, something left behind. Cole's hand tightened on the arm of his chair. He could give the boy warmth for one night, yes, but he needed to know more. Who was Ethan's mother? Why was she gone so often? And why did this child's quiet desperation strike so deep, as if fate had left him here to remind Cole of something he'd long buried? The fire hissed softly, a log collapsing into glowing embers. Cole whispered more to himself than to the boy, "This isn't just chance." Ethan, half asleep, stirred but did not wake. The toy car slipped from his fingers onto the rug. Cole picked it up carefully, turning the battered object in his hand. The missing wheel caught in the firelight, casting a faint shadow that looked eerily like a question mark. He set the car back within the boy's reach and leaned closer, his deep voice steady with an unspoken vow. "Not this time. Not with you." Morning broke gray and silent over Aspen, the storm easing but leaving a heavy quilt of snow across the slopes. Cole Harrington stood at the wide kitchen window, a mug of coffee in his hand, watching the world glisten under the pale light. Behind him, Ethan sat at the counter in one of the tall stools, wrapped in the same wool blanket, nibbling on toast with hesitant bites. Cole glanced back, studying the boy as though memorizing him. Ethan's small hand still clutched the toy car between bites, the missing wheel wobbling as he set it on the counter. The sight deepened Cole's resolve. "You like it here?" Cole asked gently. Ethan nodded, crumbs on his lips. "It's warm. Feels safe." Cole let the words settle. Safe. A word money could buy for his resorts, yet somehow hadn't existed in this boy's life. He set his mug down and leaned on the counter. "Ethan," he said carefully, "I want to help, but I need to know more about your mom." The boy's shoulders tensed. His eyes dropped to the car. "She works nights, at the diner on Main Street. Sometimes she comes back late. Sometimes—" He trailed off, shaking his head. Cole crouched so their eyes met. "Has she ever told you why she's gone so long?" Ethan hesitated, then whispered, "She says she's doing it for me. But when she doesn't come back, I think maybe she just doesn't want to anymore." His voice broke, small and raw. Cole felt his chest tighten. He reached out, resting a steady hand on the counter beside the boy. "That's not your fault. None of it is your fault." Still, unease gnawed at him. The diner was no place for endless nights. Something didn't add up. Later that morning, after Ethan had fallen back asleep near the fireplace, Cole retreated to his office and dialed a number. "Weston," he said when the private investigator picked up, "I need you in Aspen, today." The man's gravelly voice came back without hesitation. "What are we looking at?" Cole turned toward the foyer, where the boy's backpack sat slumped against the wall like a discarded soldier. "A child showed up at my door last night. Ethan, 8 years old. His mother works nights at a diner on Main. I need everything. Her records, her situation, why she isn't home." A pause, then Weston's tone sharpened. "You think the boy's in danger?" Cole's jaw tightened. "I don't think. I know. No kid begs to sleep in a garage unless something's broken. Find out what it is." By afternoon, the investigator had driven up the mountain roads, files already in hand. They sat across the mahogany desk in Cole's study, the storm-muted light falling on scattered papers. Weston flipped one folder open. "Her name's Anna Brooks, 32. Works at Miller's Diner. Payroll records confirm night shifts 6 days a week. Here's the thing. She and her son used to live in one of your company's affordable housing units downtown. 3 years ago, the rent hiked. They couldn't keep up. Eviction followed." Cole froze, his hand curling into a fist. "One of mine?" "Yeah," Weston confirmed grimly. "Your signature's on the corporate approval for the increase. They bounced between motels for a while before settling in a basement rental on the outskirts." Cole's stomach dropped, the weight of responsibility slamming into him. He had built towers and resorts, marketed them as havens of luxury, while families like Ethan's were forced out into the cold. Weston slid another document across the desk. Tenant records tied directly to Anna Brooks. Dates, amounts, eviction notices, all stamped with Cole's company seal. "This isn't just a sad story, Harrington," Weston said quietly. "It's personal. The boy who showed up at your door, he lost his home because of you." Cole sat back, the fire behind him hissing softly. His empire, built on numbers and stone, had cracked under the weight of a single truth. He thought of Ethan asleep by his fireplace, the toy car resting on the rug like a sentinel. The boy had asked for nothing but shelter, yet his very presence had exposed the emptiness behind Cole's wealth. For the first time in years, Cole felt guilt pierce through the armor he wore like a tailored suit, and he knew this was only the beginning. The snow outside had quieted, the mountains wearing a soft white veil under the pale winter sun. Inside his study, Cole Harrington sat at the broad mahogany desk, tenant records spread like accusations before him. Each line carried his company's seal, his signature. Proof that Ethan's mother had once been part of his empire, until a decision he approved had pushed her out into the cold. Weston, the private investigator, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. That's the story, Harrington. No hidden enemies, no secret schemes, just numbers. Rent went up, she couldn't keep up, and the boy, he paid the price. Cole's jaw flexed, his blue eyes fixed on the eviction notice. It was stamped with finality, dated nearly 3 years ago. I did this, he muttered. Weston raised an eyebrow. You and every executive who's ever looked at a balance sheet instead of a face. The words landed harder than Cole expected. He thought of his father's quiet lessons. Take care of what carries you. He had taken care of profits, towers, luxury resorts that gleamed under ski town lights. But faces like Anna Brooks and her son had slipped through the cracks. Cole rose abruptly, pacing to the window. The snow-draped Rockies stretched beyond the glass, breathtaking, merciless. He had built an empire on these slopes, marketing warmth and belonging, while a child had been left wandering in the cold just miles away. Weston, he said finally, his voice low but resolute. I want every detail about Anna Brooks, not just her job, her debts, her health, everything. If she's carrying this alone, I need to know how deep it runs. The investigator gave a slow nod. You're not looking at her like a landlord anymore. Cole turned, his square jaw set. No, I'm looking at her like a man who failed her, and I don't intend to fail again. Weston packed up the files, leaving behind the tenant record with Ethan's name scrawled in the margin. After he left, Cole lingered in the silence of the study. His eyes fell on the worn-out toy car resting on the desk, left there while Ethan napped by the fire. The chipped paint caught the light, the missing wheel casting a crooked shadow. Cole picked it up, rolling the broken wheel between his fingers. He imagined Anna giving it to her son, perhaps with an apology she couldn't voice. Something to hold on to when she wasn't there. That car carried more weight than all the polished trophies on his shelves. He pressed it gently into his palm, the way his father once pressed die-cast cars into his. But unlike his collection, this one bore scars. Scars of nights too cold, days too hard. A soft voice pulled him from thought. Mr. Harrington? Ethan stood at the doorway, hair tousled, blanket trailing from his shoulders like a cape. His eyes, still heavy with sleep, flicked to the toy car in Cole's hand. I didn't mean to take it, Cole said quickly, setting it back on the desk. It's yours. Ethan shook his head slowly. You can hold it, if you want. Just don't fix it. Mom says some things are supposed to stay the way they are. The words pierced deeper than the boy realized. Cole crouched down, meeting him at eye level. Ethan, do you remember the apartment you used to live in? The one before the basement. The boy nodded, his small fingers clutching the blanket. It was brighter. We had windows. Mom laughed more back then. His eyes dimmed. Then it was gone. Cole exhaled, steady but heavy. He knew now. The file Weston had left behind confirmed it. Ethan and his mother had lived under his roof until his own pen had taken it away. That night, after putting Ethan to bed in a guest room, Cole returned to the study. Alone with the toy car, he whispered the words he couldn't yet say to the boy. I let you fall, but I won't let you stay fallen. He set the car carefully on the desk. The chipped paint gleaming faintly under the lamplight, a broken truth he could no longer ignore. The house was quiet again that night, but it no longer felt like the peaceful silence Cole Harrington used to crave. It felt heavier, crowded by truths he could not ignore. He sat alone in his study, the toy car resting in his palm. He turned it over slowly, tracing the chipped edges, the missing wheel. The object felt more alive than the polished trophies on his shelves, as if it carried not only Ethan's story, but his own failures. His reflection stared back from the window. Tailored suit, broad shoulders, streaks of gray at his temples. The image of a man who had everything, yet somehow less than a boy with a broken toy. Cole closed his eyes. Memories came uninvited. He remembered nights as a boy, sitting on the stairs of his childhood estate, waiting for his father to come home. Sometimes the old man came through the door with a smile, handing him a new car for his collection. But more often, he came in late and silent, eyes glued to paperwork, shoulders sagging with burdens he never shared. Cole had learned early that objects could replace presence, that silence could swallow the words "I'm proud of you" until they no longer existed. He thought he had outrun that emptiness by building empires, but Ethan's knock on his door had dragged it all back. The boy's whispered plea echoed in his mind. "Can I sleep in your garage?" Cole pressed the toy car into his palm until the edges left faint marks. He had built towers of stone and glass, yet a child had been left wandering the snow because of decisions tied to his own name. He wasn't just guilty as a landlord. He was guilty as a man who knew the cost of silence and still let it echo through others' lives. He leaned back, running a hand over his jaw. The fireplace hissed softly, shadows flickering across the room. The door creaked open. Ethan padded in, blanket draped over his shoulders, his small figure dwarfed by the grandeur of the hallway. "Couldn't sleep?" Cole asked softly. The boy shook his head, eyes fixed on the fire. "It's too quiet." Cole gestured to the chair beside him. Ethan climbed up, curling into the seat, the blanket wrapping around his knees. The boy's gaze landed on the toy car in Cole's hand. "You keep looking at it," Ethan murmured. Cole gave a faint smile. "It reminds me of my dad. He used to give me cars like this when I was your age." He paused. "But I always kept mine perfect. Never played with them. Just lined them up behind glass." Ethan tilted his head. "That sounds boring." The comment startled a small laugh out of Cole. Low, genuine, something he hadn't felt in months. "You're probably right." Ethan's expression softened, but his voice trembled. "Sometimes I think my mom forgets about me, like maybe she doesn't want to come back." Cole's heart clenched. He leaned closer, his voice steady. "Ethan, listen to me. Parents make mistakes. They get tired. They get lost. But it doesn't mean you don't matter. You matter more than anything." The boy's eyes glistened in the firelight. "Do you really think so?" "I know so," Cole said firmly. Ethan nodded slowly, resting his head against the chair's armrest. Within minutes, his breathing evened out, sleep claiming him again. Cole stayed beside him, watching the small chest rise and fall, the toy car resting loosely in his tiny hand. Alone with his thoughts, Cole whispered into the quiet, "I built towers, but I forgot the people who lived beneath them." The fire crackled. Snow fell in heavy silence outside. And Cole Harrington, king of the Rockies, master of mansions, sat beside a boy who had come to his door with nothing but a broken toy and a plea. For the first time in years, Cole wasn't sure if he was mourning or beginning again. The next morning dawned clear, sunlight scattering diamonds across the snow that blanketed Aspen's peaks. The storm had passed, but Cole Harrington's mind remained restless. He lingered by the doorway of the guest room where Ethan slept. The boy curled under heavy blankets, the battered toy car tucked in his small hand as though it were the only anchor he had. Cole watched him for a moment longer, then stepped inside. He crouched by the bed, the floor creaking faintly beneath his weight. "Ethan," he said softly. The boy stirred, blinking awake, his eyes wary at first until recognition softened them. "Morning." Cole smiled gently. "Morning. How'd you sleep?" "Better than most nights." Ethan's voice was quiet, but there was a trace of relief in it. Cole leaned closer, lowering his voice as though confiding a secret. "Ethan, I need you to hear me. You'll never have to ask for a garage again. Not while I'm here." The boy blinked, uncertain he had heard right. His lips parted, but no sound came. He clutched the toy car tighter, as if it might help him test whether promises could be real. "You mean it?" he whispered. Cole nodded, his square jaw firm, his deep blue eyes steady. "I mean it." The boy's throat worked as though swallowing words too heavy for his age. "People say things like that. Then they leave." Cole's chest tightened. "I won't leave. Not you." He reached into the pocket of his navy suit and pulled out a second toy car, a pristine die-cast model from his childhood collection. He placed it carefully on the nightstand beside Ethan's battered one. "This was my favorite when I was your age," Cole said. "I kept it perfect, never played with it. But it's just a car unless someone makes it real. You can borrow it if you want." Ethan's eyes widened, darting between the two cars, the chipped one with a missing wheel and the gleaming one untouched by time. His small fingers brushed both as if trying to connect them. Cole watched the boy's hesitation, then placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "You're not alone anymore. Not as long as I'm here." The words hung in the air, heavy yet freeing. For Cole, they weren't just a promise to the child, they were a vow to himself. Ethan's eyes filled with cautious hope. He whispered, "Feels like family." Cole's throat tightened, but he forced a smile. "That's what it should feel like." They sat in silence for a long moment, sunlight streaming through the window, painting golden lines across the boy's face. The world outside was still sharp with winter, but here in this room, something softer had begun. Ethan set the perfect car beside his battered one and looked up at Cole. "Can we keep both? Side by side?" Cole's voice was thick when he answered. "That's exactly where they belong." As Ethan settled back under the blankets, his small hand rested on both cars, bridging old scars and new beginnings. Cole rose slowly, straightening his red tie, and felt something he hadn't in years, a sense of purpose that went deeper than contracts or towers of stone. In the hallway, he paused, staring out through tall windows at the snow-draped mountains. His empire suddenly looked different, less like monuments to his success and more like reminders of the people he had overlooked. Behind him, Ethan's quiet breathing filled the room. For the first time, the mansion didn't echo with emptiness. It carried the sound of a promise, alive and fragile, but real. Cole whispered to himself as he walked away, "Not this boy. Not this time." The following afternoon, sunlight spilled across the grand living room, its warmth falling on Ethan as he knelt near the hearth, running his fingers across the smooth surface of Cole's die-cast car. He still kept his own battered one close, the missing wheel wobbling every time he pushed it forward. The two cars sat side by side, one flawless, one scarred. Cole stood behind him, watching quietly. The boy seemed lighter somehow, but there was still hesitation in his eyes, the kind of mistrust only years of disappointment could plant. Ethan glanced up. "You won't be mad if I keep this one too, right?" He held up the perfect car. Cole crouched down, his powerful frame folding easily beside the child. "It's yours as long as you want it." Ethan studied the toy in silence, then whispered, "Adults say stuff, but they don't always mean it. My mom says she'll come back before sunrise, but sometimes she doesn't." His voice cracked. "What if you don't mean it either?" The words cut deep. Cole reached into the inner drawer of the coffee table and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside, wrapped in felt, was another toy car, the exact match to Ethan's battered one, down to the model and the original paint color. Cole's father had given it to him when he was a boy. Part of a pair meant to symbolize never alone. He set the car carefully on the rug between them. Ethan's eyes widened. He picked it up with both hands, tracing its smooth paint, the wheels still perfect. His breath caught. "It's the same. Exactly the same." Cole nodded slowly. "My father gave me this when I was your age. I've kept it all these years. I didn't know why until now." Ethan's small voice trembled. "Why do you have it?" "Because," Cole said, his deep blue eyes steady, "I think it was meant for you, for us." The boy looked from the flawless car in his lap to the chipped one he always carried. For the first time, his guarded expression broke into something brighter, hope, fragile but real. "You're really not going to leave?" Ethan asked, still needing to hear it. Cole placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "No, I'm not leaving. Not now, not ever." Ethan pressed the two cars together, one chipped, one perfect, and for a moment his face lit with childlike wonder. Then his voice grew softer. "Every time I asked someone to stay, they left, But if you promise, maybe this time is different. Cole swallowed hard. This time is different. The fire crackled, filling the silence between them. For Cole, the moment felt bigger than words. It wasn't just about shelter. It wasn't even about redemption. It was about a connection that had formed in the middle of a snowstorm and was now binding itself tighter with every breath. Ethan leaned into him suddenly, small arms wrapping around his side. Cole stiffened. Hugs had never come easily. But then he softened, resting a strong hand on the boy's back. For a man who had once built towers to keep others at a distance, the warmth of a child's embrace undid him in ways he hadn't expected. The toy cars lay side by side on the rug, one whole, one scarred, symbols of past and present colliding. Ethan finally whispered into the fabric of Cole's shirt, "Feels like maybe I can believe you." Cole's throat tightened, but he managed to answer, "You can." And in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. Not a contract, not a transaction, just a promise sealed in the quiet of a mansion that no longer felt hollow. Snow sparkled under a clear afternoon sky as smoke curled lazily from the mansion's chimney. Inside, warmth pulsed from the stone fireplace where Cole and Ethan sat cross-legged on the rug, the toy cars lined up between them. Cole leaned forward, his sleeves rolled, a grilled cheese sandwich crisping in the cast-iron pan nearby. The aroma filled the room. Ethan's eyes followed every move, curious, hungry. "You ever cook before?" Cole asked, flipping the sandwich with practiced ease. Ethan shrugged. "Sometimes. Mom lets me stir soup, but she's tired a lot. We mostly eat cereal." Cole smiled faintly. "Then today, you get something better." He cut the sandwich into neat halves, placing one on a plate in front of the boy. Ethan bit into it, the melted cheese stretching as he pulled back. His eyes widened. "Wow," he mumbled through the bite. This is amazing." Cole chuckled softly, his deep blue eyes glinting with something lighter than guilt for the first time. "Simple things can be the best." After lunch, they moved to the chessboard set by the fire. Cole explained the rules slowly, showing Ethan how the pieces moved. The boy leaned in, furrowed brow focused, determination fierce for someone so small. "Like this?" Ethan asked, sliding the knight clumsily. "Close," Cole said. He reached over, guiding the boy's hand with patience. "Knights move in an L." Ethan tried again, this time with a grin. "Got it." For over an hour, they played, laughter spilling into the high-ceilinged room when Ethan accidentally put Cole's king in check. Cole exaggerated a groan, making the boy giggle. Later, bundled in coats, they stepped into the courtyard. Snow lay thick and soft, untouched since the storm. Cole showed Ethan how to roll the first ball, their gloved hands packing snow tighter until it formed a solid base. Together, they stacked pieces, building a lopsided snowman. Ethan laughed so hard his cheeks turned red again, though this time from joy instead of frost. "Needs something," the boy decided, eyes sparkling. He pulled the toy car from his pocket and pressed it gently into the snowman's side. "Now it's ours." Cole stared at the car embedded in snow, the chipped paint catching sunlight. A scarred piece of history, now decorating a child's creation. For a man who once measured life by contracts and towers, this small moment carried a weight far greater. Ethan looked up at him, smiling shyly. "Feels like family." The words hit Cole like a blow and a balm at once. He crouched, meeting the boy's gaze head-on. "It is family. That's what this is." Ethan's smile trembled, the hope in his eyes fragile as glass. "Promise?" Cole's deep voice carried no hesitation. "Promise." They stood side by side, looking at the crooked snowman crowned with a battered toy car. For the first time in years, the mansion echoed not with silence but with laughter, the kind that lingered in the air long after the sound had gone. Later, as evening settled and the fire roared once more, Cole watched Ethan doze off in the armchair, blanket pulled up to his chin. The boy's lips curved faintly, as though dreams were kinder here. Cole's hand tightened around his father's toy car, the one he had shared with Ethan. For years, it had sat untouched, meaningless, behind glass. Now, in the hands of a child who needed it, the car had become more than a relic. It had become a bridge. Cole whispered into the quiet, almost as if speaking to his father's memory. "This house is alive again." And it was true. The boy had filled the silence with laughter, warmth, and the faintest glimmer of belonging. The mansion was no longer silent. Staff who had returned after the storm now moved carefully through the halls, exchanging curious glances whenever they caught sight of the small boy curled up by the fire or trailing behind Cole Harrington like a shadow. By midweek, whispers had spread beyond the estate. A chauffeur spoke to a concierge, who spoke to a maid, until the story reached the ears of someone who worked for a tabloid. By Friday, the first headline appeared: "Mystery Child in Harrington's Mansion During Aspen Blizzard." Cole sat at the breakfast table, the newspaper folded open beside his untouched plate. Ethan ate cereal across from him, swinging his legs, oblivious to the weight of ink on the page. The headline screamed louder than the storm had. Questions filled the article. Was the boy an illegitimate child? A scandal waiting to erupt? Or worse, proof of hypocrisy from the man who owned half the luxury housing in the Rockies? Cole exhaled slowly, folding the paper shut before Ethan could notice. A phone buzzed on the table. His assistant's voice came sharp through the speaker. "Cole, investors are calling non-stop. They want answers about the boy. Rumors are hitting the wires fast. The board is demanding a statement." Cole's square jaw tightened. "Tell them nothing. Not yet." "Cole, I said nothing." His deep voice cut firm. He ended the call, slipping the phone back into his pocket. Across the table, Ethan looked up, spoon paused mid-air. "Did I do something wrong?" Cole's heart clenched. "No, Ethan, you did nothing wrong. People just talk when they don't understand." The boy's gaze dropped to his bowl, small shoulders hunching. "Mom says people like to talk about us too. Never nice things." Cole pushed his chair back and crouched beside him, his broad frame making the boy seem even smaller. "You listen to me. What they say out there, that's noise. What matters is in here." He tapped Ethan's chest gently. "And in here." He tapped his own. Ethan gave a faint nod, but doubt still clouded his young eyes. Later that day, Cole walked the length of his study, calls with lawyers and investors filling the air like static. They wanted damage control. Some urged him to send the boy away quietly, to claim ignorance, to protect the empire. Cole stared out at the snow-draped mountains, the same peaks that had made him a king in glass towers. For the first time, the empire felt like a prison. That evening, Ethan sat curled on the rug, sketching clumsy lines on scrap paper with pencils a housekeeper had found. Cole watched from the armchair, the boy's small figure haloed by firelight. "What are you drawing?" Cole asked. Ethan held it up shyly. 2 cars, side by side, one whole, one missing a wheel. Above them, a crooked house with smoke rising from its chimney. Beneath, in uneven letters, "Home." The word pierced Cole deeper than the headlines, deeper than the investors' panic. He leaned forward, his voice low and certain. "Ethan, you don't ever have to wonder again where home is. Not while I'm here." The boy's eyes lifted, searching, as though testing if the promise would hold. Cole placed a hand on the paper, steadying it. "They can write what they want, but I know who you are, and I know who I need to be." The fire snapped loudly, as though sealing his vow. Far away, the tabloids sharpened their pens. Investors whispered about scandal. But inside the Aspen estate, a man and a boy sat together, their bond written not in headlines, but in the fragile strokes of a child's drawing. The boardroom in Denver buzzed with tension. Investors sat around the polished table, their voices clipped, their questions sharp. Headlines about the Aspen boy had only grown. Photographs of Ethan playing in the snow outside the mansion splashed across tabloids, speculation running wild. Cole Harrington entered in his navy suit and red tie, tall and commanding, but his expression carried a gravity that silenced the room. He laid a folder on the table, untouched by the storm outside. "Gentlemen," he began, his deep voice steady, "I won't deny the boy's presence. He came to my door during the blizzard. He stayed. And yes, the press has their story, but I have mine." An investor leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Cole, the optics are terrible. Rumors of illegitimacy, questions of responsibility. We can't afford scandal." Cole's blue eyes narrowed. "Scandal isn't a boy looking for shelter. Scandal is that in this state alone, hundreds of children spend nights without heat while we sit here debating profit margins." Murmurs rippled. Some bristled. Others looked uneasy. Another voice, calmer, asked, "What exactly are you proposing?" Cole straightened, his broad shoulders filling the room. "I'm proposing we use what we have. For years, we've left hundreds of luxury units vacant in the winter months, waiting for buyers, waiting for renters. Empty shells while storms rage outside. That ends now. I'm launching the Snowhaven project." He opened the folder, sliding photographs and documents across the table. "Effective immediately, we'll designate vacant units across Colorado as emergency winter shelters. Staffed, heated, monitored. Families like Ethan's will have somewhere to go when the world turns cold." An older investor scoffed. "And who pays for this charity?" Cole's jaw tightened. "I do. Personally. The Harrington Group will cover costs. You'll still have your dividends. But understand this. If anyone at this table finds compassion too expensive, you're free to walk." The silence that followed was heavier than any storm. Some looked away, unwilling to meet his gaze. Others exchanged thoughtful glances. At last, one cleared his throat. "If the press spins it right, this could be good for image." Cole's eyes sharpened. "This isn't about image. This is about lives. Remember that." He gathered the folder, leaving them in silence as he strode out. Back in Aspen, word spread quickly. Local news picked up the story first. Headlines shifting from Mystery Boy and Mansion to Harrington CEO launches Snowhaven project. Soon, national outlets followed, reporting statistics, sharing images of families moving into warm units, their breath no longer visible in the air. At the estate, Ethan sat by the fire, toy cars lined in a neat row. When Cole returned, snow clinging to his overcoat, the boy looked up anxiously. "Did they make you send me away?" Ethan asked. Cole crouched beside him, eyes steady, voice firm. "No, they listened, and because of you, hundreds of kids will sleep in warm beds tonight." Ethan blinked, stunned. "Because of me?" Cole placed a strong hand on his shoulder. "You knocked on my door, Ethan. You reminded me what matters. This—" He gestured to the boy, the toy cars, the warmth of the fire, "is what matters." Ethan's eyes shimmered. He picked up his battered car, pressing it against Cole's perfect one. The two sat side by side, whole and broken, yet belonging together. "Then maybe," Ethan whispered, his voice small but sure, "you were the one who needed saving." Cole's throat tightened, but he managed to smile. "Maybe I did." The fire glowed brighter, the storm outside long gone. For the first time, Cole felt the weight of his empire lighten, transformed not by profit, but by the knock of a boy who had asked for nothing more than a garage. Snowflakes drifted lazily through the crisp December air, settling over the Harrington estate like powdered sugar. Inside, the mansion pulsed with warmth and anticipation. It was Christmas Eve. Ethan sat cross-legged by the grand tree, his blanket draped around his shoulders, the soft glow of string lights reflecting in his wide eyes. Beneath the branches, wrapped boxes glittered in red and gold. But Cole had set one apart, small and unassuming, waiting on the table beside the fire. Cole entered the room in a navy sweater for once instead of his suit, a quiet smile softening his strong jaw. He carried the box carefully, like something fragile. "Ethan," he said, crouching down so they were eye level, "this one's for you." The boy tilted his head, hesitant. "For me? But you've already given me so much." Cole shook his head. "Not enough. Not yet." Placed the box in Ethan's lap. Small fingers tugged at the ribbon, peeling back the paper with a mix of curiosity and awe. Inside lay a toy car, identical to the battered one he always carried. Its paint gleamed as though newly polished, all four wheels intact, restored to the way it must have looked when it first left the factory. Ethan gasped, his breath catching. It's the same, but new." Cole's deep blue eyes softened. "It's yours. I had it restored, and look closer." Ethan lifted the car, turning it in his hands. Along the underside, etched carefully in silver, were words he read aloud, his voice trembling. "Home is where you're seen." His small hands shook as he looked up at Cole, tears welling. "No one's ever given me something like this before." Cole rested a steady hand on his shoulder. "Because no one ever saw you the way you deserve to be seen. Until now." The boy launched forward suddenly, wrapping his arms tightly around Cole's neck. The embrace was fierce, desperate, filled with gratitude words couldn't hold. Cole hugged him back, his broad frame trembling for the first time in years. They stayed like that for a long moment, the only sound the crackle of firewood and the faint whisper of snow against the windows. When Ethan finally pulled back, his smile wobbled but held steady. "This feels like I belong." Cole's voice was thick but certain. "You do belong. Always." That evening, Cole gathered the staff in the great hall, Ethan clutching his restored car at his side. In front of them all, Cole made an announcement. "Tonight isn't just about this house," he began, his voice carrying across the vaulted ceiling. "It's about every child who has ever felt invisible. The Snowhaven Project is just the beginning. Starting in January, we'll launch a support program. Education, shelter, mentorship for kids like Ethan. No more cracks to fall through." The staff exchanged glances, some surprised, some smiling through tears. Cole looked down at Ethan, who stood proudly, his small chest lifted as though he had sparked it all. Later, as the boy drifted to sleep in his room, the toy car resting on the nightstand, Cole lingered by the doorway. For years, his halls had been silent, his life measured by towers of stone. But tonight, the house breathed differently. It carried the sound of belonging, the heartbeat of a promise fulfilled. Cole whispered into the quiet, almost a prayer, "Merry Christmas, Ethan." And for the first time in decades, the words didn't feel empty. They felt like home. Spring thawed the snow in Aspen, green pushing through the white as streams cut silver paths down the mountainsides. The Harrington estate looked different now, not in its stone and glass, but in the life that pulsed within its walls. Cole Harrington stood at the open terrace doors, the breeze carrying laughter from the garden. Ethan chased a soccer ball across the lawn with two other children from one of the first families sheltered through the Snowhaven Project. Their voices rang out, pure and unguarded, weaving through spaces that had once echoed only with silence. Cole's gaze softened. For years, he had thought wealth was measured in towers and contracts, in the applause of boardrooms. But standing here, watching Ethan's grin flash as he kicked the ball, he knew better. Wealth was in this sound, the laughter of children who finally felt safe. "Mr. Harrington," a voice said gently behind him. He turned to see Anna Brooks, Ethan's mother, standing in the doorway. She looked different now, less weighed down by exhaustion. There was still weariness in her eyes, but also relief, gratitude. "You've done more than I ever could have imagined," she said. "For him, for all of us." Cole shook his head. "I should have done it years ago. I signed papers that took your home away. And because of that, Ethan ended up on my doorstep in a blizzard. I'll carry that guilt the rest of my life." Anna stepped closer, her voice steady. "We all make mistakes, but not everyone chooses to make them right. He sees you, Cole. Not the money, not the houses. You." Cole swallowed hard, his deep blue eyes drifting back toward the boy in the yard. Ethan had paused, holding his toy car aloft, showing it proudly to the other kids before tucking it safely into his pocket. The same battered car, restored now to working condition, but still carrying its scars. Cole realized that was what they both were, scarred, but not broken. That evening, the great hall filled with warmth and music. Families from across Colorado gathered, many of them staying in the once vacant units that had saved them during the winter. Children played under chandeliers. Staff served food without the stiffness of formality. For once, the mansion felt less like a fortress and more like a home. Ethan tugged at Cole's sleeve. "Come see," he urged, pulling him toward the fireplace. On the mantel sat a row of toy cars, some from Cole's old collection, some from thrift stores Ethan had picked out. The restored one gleamed in the center, the engraving shining under the lights. "Home is where you're seen." Ethan's voice was proud. "They're not behind glass anymore. They're for playing. For everyone." Cole knelt, his large hand resting on the boy's shoulder. "That's how it should be, Life isn't about keeping things perfect. It's about sharing them." Ethan leaned into him, whispering with the certainty only a child could carry. "You kept your promise. You didn't leave." Cole's throat tightened. He pressed his hand gently against Ethan's back. "And I never will." As the night stretched on, laughter and music spilling through every hall, Cole realized the house would never be hollow again. Not because of the wealth he had built, but because of the warmth he had finally chosen to give. The world outside still called him a mogul, a tycoon, a man who ruled mountains. But here, within these walls, he was simply something else, something more. He was a father in all the ways that mattered. And it had all begun with a knock on his door in the snow.